Dear Christopher, here is your friend Thomas the Tank Engine. He wanted to come out of his station yard and see the world. These stories tell you how he did it. I hope you will like them, because you helped me to make them. Your loving Daddy.
Percy's passengers. Percy was talking to James in the shed at the big station.
My God was telling me how lonely he gets in his van. I think he ought to take some passengers sometimes. It might cheer him up.
He's not allowed to do that, said James virtuously. It's against the regulations. Guards are important, and passengers might distract them, so that they couldn't look after the train properly.
Oh dear,
said Percy.
Yes, I suppose they might.
They do it on the Midland, put in Gordon. Someone told me about it when I went to Carlisle with that special, but they don't do it on the other railway. It's on some preserved line where they haven't got any coaches.
You see, James,
said Percy triumphantly. Oh, well, if they haven't any coaches, that's different, James huffed. I'm sure the Fat Controller wouldn't approve, though.
Pooh,
replied Percy cheekily.
Little you know.
He puffed away to collect some trucks from the harbour. Meanwhile, on the branch line, some passengers got out of Henrietta at the station by the airfield. They all went through the ticket barrier, except for two, a man and a woman. Ah, said the ticket inspector when he looked at their tickets, you've come too far. You should have got out at the last station. The passengers looked at him. Then they looked at each other and shook their heads. The last station, the ticket inspector repeated, slowly. You must go back there. There was a pause. Then the man said something to his wife in a language the ticket inspector didn't understand. He asked the porter to bring the station master. A short time later, Percy came chuntering happily along the branch line with his train of trucks from the harbour. He saw the signal at the station by the airfield was set at danger, and the station master waiting for him on the platform.
Oh dear, there must have been an accident,
he thought as he stopped.
I hope no one's hurt.
The station master came over with the two passengers. I'm giving the guard these two passengers to travel in his van, he told Percy. They're foreigners who came too far on Toby's train by mistake. Will you stop at the station by the river and let them off, please? Percy was confused.
Passengers?
He asked when the guard had taken them away.
But this is a goods train.
That's right, Percy, said the station master. They're going to travel with the guard in his van.
But James says it's against it's not allowed, sir.
The station master laughed. James is right, Percy. But I don't think James or the Fat Controller would mind us helping two foreign visitors on our island who can't understand our language, do you? That made it all right, of course. The guard saw that his visitors were as comfortable as he could make them in his van. And when, a few minutes later, they reached the station they wanted, they nodded and smiled and shook hands with the driver and fireman. Then the guard showed them to a taxi, which was waiting to take them on the rest of their journey. A few weeks later, a parcel arrived with brightly colored foreign stamps on the wrapping. Inside were warm new scarves and gloves for Percy's driver, fireman, and guard, and a letter addressed to the Fat Controller, saying how splendid his railway was. Percy was proud, but he didn't tell James.
It might make him jealous,
he said to himself.
And that would never do.
One day, Percy was standing at the junction. He had a long goods train which he was taking to Tidmouth, but he had to wait for Henry to pass with a passenger train before he could go on. Henry was late, but the sun was warm and Percy didn't mind. At last, Henry arrived. "I'm sorry I'm late," he panted. "I had to wait for ages for the connection at the other railway. Do you know," he went on, "that they have goods trains on the other railway that don't have brake vans? It doesn't seem right, does it? I'm glad to see you still got yours." The signal dropped and Henry thought he'd better go. "Must make up for lost time. Goodbye." Percy was intrigued. A goods train with no brake van, he thought to himself. Later, Percy told his driver what Henry had said. His driver laughed and explained. "Goods trains on the other railway have special brakes. Like passenger trains and Henry's flying kipper, they don't need brake vans. Your trucks just have couplings, so they need brakes at each end of the train in case a coupling snaps. You know what stupid things trucks are? They did it to James on Gordon's Hill, remember?" "Pah!" scoffed Percy. He thought he knew better than James. "I know how to keep my trucks in order. What's good enough for the other railway is good enough for me. I don't need a stupid old brake van." "Don't be so silly, Percy," his driver scolded. But Percy took no notice. It would have been better if he had. A few days later, Percy was shunting trucks at the harbour near the big station. He was just completing his train by backing onto the brake van when the shunter's attention was distracted. The shunter thought that he had coupled the brake van to the train, but he hadn't. The guard blew his whistle and Percy set off quickly, hoping to get a good run at the hill leading to the main line. But the guard and his van were left behind. The guard waved and shouted, "Stop, Percy! Stop!" But Percy didn't hear. He was too busy climbing the hill. All might have been well if Percy hadn't started so quickly. Unfortunately, the jerk had weakened one of the couplings. As Percy snorted up the hill, the weight of the loaded trucks dragging behind the weak coupling broke it. The last trucks began to run back down the hill towards the harbour. The guard was standing on the veranda of his brake van. He looked on in horror as the trucks hurtled towards him. He ran quickly to his brake handle and checked that it was fully on. Then he jumped clear, just in time. The trucks battered into the brake van with a resounding thump. The van shuddered and screeched as it was pushed along the line, but it stood firm and stayed on the rails. The truck's mad rush was halted. Percy backed slowly down the hill to see what had happened. "Phew," remarked Percy's driver. "You see, Percy, brake vans do have their uses after all." And Percy had to admit his driver was right.
Hi everyone, Thomas here. If you'd like to watch more, check out some more of these really useful videos and make sure to subscribe.